Today, we're going to learn about what makes EBMUD water some of the best in the country. If you'd like to learn more about this Water Wednesday or any of our past Water Wednesday Speaker Series events, please visit eastbaymud.com/Water Wednesday. Today's recording for this series event will be posted next week. Please ask questions in the question and answer box on your toolbar in English or in Spanish, and they'll be answered at the end of the presentation by our experts. Before we introduce our experts, I'd like to explain how if you're joining us in another language, you can have translations this evening in Spanish live. If you're joining us in Spanish, please follow these instructions shown on the screen. Si desea escuchar en español, siga las instrucciones que se muestran ahora. Instrucciones en español continuado aquí. Okay, without further ado, if everyone's in their correct room, we'll go ahead and get started. Our water quality experts with us this evening are Susan Teefy, EBMUD Water Quality Manager with over 30 years of experience in the drinking water field. We also have with us this evening Javier Ramos, EBMUD Water Distribution Supervisor, born and raised in Oakland, with 23 years of experience here at EBMUD in water quality. We also have with us this evening Stefan Cajina, California Water Board Division of Drinking Water, North Coast Section Chief, who oversees Greater San Francisco Bay Area water systems with 24 years of experience in the drinking water field. All right. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Susan Teefy, who will kick it off talking about water quality here at EBMUD.
Thank you, Charla. Good evening. I'm Susan Teefy, Manager of Water Quality at EBMUD. And let's answer this first question. Why does EBMUD exist? Access to clean, safe drinking water is the backbone of civilization as we know it. EBMUD is one of many water agencies in our state that exist to protect public health and the environment. So you may be wondering, how does EBMUD fit into the larger picture of drinking water suppliers in California? I'll turn this over to Stefan.
So my name is Stefan Cajina, and I lead the North Coastal section of the State Water Resources Control Board Division of Drinking Water. I'm going to talk right now about where EBMUD fits into the larger picture of drinking water in California. About 7,400 public water systems in California, and they are regulated under state and federal law. What is a public water system? A public water system is a water system with 15 or more service connections, or that regularly serves at least 25 individuals at least 60 days out of the year. About 3,000 of California's water systems serve communities, including everything from tiny mobile home parks and farm labor camps to the largest cities. EBMUD is a community water system that serves about 1.4 million people in the East Bay, including large portions of Alameda and Contra Costa counties.
As Stefan mentioned, we supply our East Bay communities with drinking water. Different community water systems have different water sources. Let's look at where your EBMUD drinking water comes from and how it's treated before it reaches your home or business to meet your daily needs. About 90% of our water comes from the McKellamie River. This water is stored in Pardee Reservoir and is transported across the Delta in aqueducts. We also use our East Bay reservoirs to capture and store runoff water. We're going to use this story map to demonstrate, to show the story of the journey of this water as it travels from the source to the East Bay. If you want to explore this story map a little further on your own time, you can find it on eastbaymud.com/education. The journey begins roughly 200 miles east of the Bay Area in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Snow falls in the mountains, and this snowmelt makes up, on average, about 90% of the water we supply to our customers. The snow melts and flows into the McCallamy River, which provides water for farms, fish, and recreation, as well as drinking water for the East Bay. Moving east, the water is stored in Pardee Reservoir near the town of Jackson. Pardee Reservoir can hold more than 200,000 acre-feet of water. 3 large aqueducts carry that water from Pardee Reservoir about 90 miles across the Central Valley through the Delta and to the East Bay. East Bay Mud has 6 water treatment plants. The water from the McCallamy River is treated at 3 of them, located right along the aqueducts. And the Orinda treatment plant is the largest. So these McCallamy treatment plants are in service most of the year. In the summer months, when water demand is high, we utilize our Sobrante and Upper San Leandro treatment plants as well. After treatment, the water travels through a tunnel into the East Bay, through a tunnel in the East Bay Hills, which is roughly parallel to the Caldecott Tunnel. The water supplies the East Bay all the way from Crockett and Rodeo in the north to Hayward and San Leandro in the south. The Orinda water treatment plant came online in 1936 and has been treating water for the East Bay for more than 80 years. Forward-thinking engineers designed the system to operate by gravity, reducing our dependency on electricity. In 1934, East Bay Mud cleared the land for the construction of the new treatment plant. And the first filters were put into service in 1935. And this is a photo of the old head house. And that original building is still in service today. Looks a little better now. And the original filter boxes are still in service too. We've added modern equipment like handrails and electrically operated valves and many different kinds of analytical equipment, but the concrete boxes are original from the 1930s. So the water goes through several different processes as we treat it. After its journey from the mountains to the East Bay, the water enters the plant in these large concrete channels. The first step is coagulation. We add coagulants to get the very small particles to stick together to form larger particles, which we can then filter out. We also add chlorine at this point to kill pathogens. And the operators in this control room are monitoring and controlling all of the plant processes. After coagulation, the water goes through the filters. These are concrete boxes filled with sand and anthracite. The filters trap the coagulated particles. And after a day or 2 of operation, each filter is taken out of service and cleaned to remove the concentrated material, which is collected and disposed of. Disinfection, fluoridation, and corrosion control are 3 more important processes performed at the plant. We add ammonia to form chloramine. We add fluoride to promote dental health. And we add sodium hydroxide to prevent corrosion in the distribution system. Skilled operators are at the treatment plant all day, every day, and they test the water at every step of the process to make sure that the treatment is done correctly. Each year, EBMUD staff collect more than 20,000 samples for analysis by our laboratory to make sure that we're delivering high quality water. Then the treated water leaves the plant in a large pipeline that connects to a tunnel. And this tunnel goes through the East Bay Hills and comes out in Oakland. So water from the Orinda treatment plant flows to our customers along the bay.
Thanks so much, Susan. Before I turn things back over to the experts, let's play a little game to see if you remember where most of your drinking water comes from. Let's see how everyone did. All right, Susan, back to you.
Awesome. We are almost 100% correct. Everyone got that it comes mostly from the McElemy River. There are some additional sources. We've got the Upper San Leandro Reservoir and the San Pablo Reservoir and the Briones Reservoir here in the East Bay.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about contaminants. All water that flows through nature has contaminants. So what is a contaminant, you ask? Well, contaminants can be divided into three main categories. Physical, like sticks, dirt, sand, and dissolved solids. Chemical, including runoff from manufacturing, agriculture, and other human-made contaminants, and some contaminants that are already present in nature, like arsenic. And biological, including bacteria, virus, and other microbes.
Contaminants can be further divided into two major categories. Those that can make you sick, which are primary, and those that are aesthetic, which are secondary. So what's required versus what's extra to surpass the standards in a fiscally responsible way? It's like the difference between a reliable commuter car and a luxury vehicle.
So the requirements are divided between health-based standards and aesthetic standards. Most drinking water contaminants are regulated through maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, set by the state. There are two types of MCLs: primary MCLs, which are set to protect health, and secondary MCLs, which are set based on consumer acceptance of things like taste, odor, and appearance. There are other types of primary standards to control biological contaminants like bacteria, virus, giardia, and cryptosporidium. Some of these standards take the form of treatment techniques, which regulate the operation of water treatment plants to make sure they are removing disease-causing organisms. Around 90 drinking water contaminants have primary MCLs in California, including inorganic compounds like nitrate, arsenic, and lead, organic chemicals like benzene and trichloroethylene, or TCE, radionuclides like uranium and radium, and disinfection byproducts like trihalomethanes, or THMs. There are secondary MCLs for 16 constituents, including things like iron, manganese, color, odor, and dissolved solids.
EBMUD meets these state-prescribed health and aesthetic standards through a rigorous treatment and testing process. We have dozens of trained water quality professionals like Sammy here, dedicated to making sure that your drinking water is not only safe, but tastes good too. At the water treatment plants and at key locations in the distribution system, we have online water quality analyzers that continuously monitor parameters like chlorine residuals, turbidity, pH. And then in addition, East Bay MUD staff take a lot of field samples and analyze them on site for additional parameters like alkalinity and also turbidity, conductivity, pH, chlorine residuals, and nitrite. We also collect many samples and submit them to certified laboratories for more complicated analyses like metals and volatile organic chemicals. In total, we take more than 20,000 grab samples each year to be analyzed by our certified laboratory in accordance with strict quality assurance protocols. East Bay MUD treatment plant East Bay MUD treatment goes beyond meeting the MCLs and delivers not only safe water, but appealing too. Now we are going to show a short video of water quality staff in action, testing water at one of the many taps within our distribution system.
Well, it never gets old watching that happen. A lot of us start our careers doing something like that, and a lot of us keep at it throughout our careers because it is the way we find out that our water is safe. But you're probably wondering who makes sure East Bay MUD is checking all the boxes. So I'll talk a little bit about how drinking water is regulated. The United States Environmental Protection Agency, or US EPA, sets regulations for all public water systems in the United States. In most states, including California, the state adopts and enforces the federal regulations. In California, drinking water regulation is carried out by the State Water Resources Control Board's Division of Drinking Water, where I work. The Division of Drinking Water has more than 300 employees located in 13 offices around the state. And East Bay MUD is regulated by the division's San Francisco district located in Richmond. Now, states can make their own rules too, but they must be at least as protective as the federal regulations. California sets stricter standards for some contaminants like benzene and toluene. California has also adopted its own MCLs for a few contaminants not regulated by US EPA, like perchlorate and 1,2,3-trichloropropane, or 1,2,3-TCP. Okay. So besides setting MCLs, the Division of Drinking Water regulates water systems in various other ways, such as permitting, inspections and enforcement, review of water system operations, review of contaminant monitoring, certification of environmental laboratories that analyze drinking water samples, and responding to drinking water emergencies like wildfire, earthquakes, and drought. And this is something that we do in partnership with the affected water systems and other emergency responders.
These are all checks and balances to make sure that water agencies like East Bay MUD protect your health by appropriately treating and testing your drinking water and reporting the findings to the state.
Regulatory activities are daily work for the Division of Drinking Water, just as operating and testing the water system is daily work for East Bay MUD. Full inspections of all water system facilities are required once every 3 years, and the division reviews water quality data from all public water systems at least every month and is often in communication with water system staff daily.
East Bay MUD communicates with the Division of Drinking Water early and often about planned projects and possible problems. This picture shows East Bay MUD staff and State Water Board staff problem solving together in the field. As you may know, we're in a drought, and East Bay MUD, even though it's raining, East Bay MUD has purchased supplemental water supplies that are coming from the Sacramento River that are beginning to make their way into our water system, to our customers through our Freeport Regional Water Facility. Purchasing and treating and delivering supplemental supplies was made possible through a collaboration with the state. Supplemental supplies are treated through our treatment plants just like our regular supplies, and they meet the same high quality regulatory standards. When the snow melts and slowly makes its way into Pardee Reservoir, it doesn't pick up very many particulates or organic material. And then when it travels from Pardee Reservoir to the East Bay, inside of these enclosed aqueducts, they protect it from sunlight and runoff. In contrast, our local reservoirs, like Upper San Leandro that's pictured here, are more vulnerable to the impacts of dirt and organic material like trees and bushes and grass, as well as human activity like roads and homes. So the water that's stored in our local reservoirs has a higher mineral content and more organic material and more nutrients that could support the growth of algae. So it does taste different. East Bay MUD has 6 water treatment plants. You've heard about our largest one, the Orinda Water Treatment Plant, but different treatment plants are brought online for different reasons. Like I said, we began operating our Freeport facility just a few weeks ago to bring water from the Sacramento River due to the drought. This water is stored in our local reservoirs and mixed with our local East Bay supplies and treated through our Upper San Leandro and Sobrante water treatment plants. We operate different treatment plants based on customer use as well as ongoing construction projects. In the summer months, when people are using more water for irrigation, we bring the other treatment plants, Upper San Leandro and Sobrante water treatment plants, into service because the Orinda water treatment plant can't supply those high demands all by itself. Bringing water treatment plants into or out of service will change the aesthetic quality of the water. But it's important to know that all of East Bay water is treated and meets all the regulatory standards, regardless of which plant or reservoir is in operation. Because we have multiple treatment plants and we can move water around different parts of the East Bay, it makes us much more resilient to drought or other emergencies. This flexibility also allows us to make needed capital improvements at our water treatment plants to make sure that they continue to operate for many more years. If you have any questions about the quality of your drinking water, we want to hear from you. The most common water quality issue that we encounter are due to corrosion of old pipes and plumbing inside people's homes, which can usually be addressed with fairly simple plumbing fixes from the property owner or the manager. But regardless of the issue or how simple it may be to resolve, you can always contact East Bay MUD for issues related to your local water quality, and you can contact the state for regulatory questions that apply to all water systems.
All public water systems are required by state law to produce an annual report of what regulated contaminants are detected in your drinking water.
East Bay MUD's water quality report can be found in English and Spanish and Chinese at eastbaymud or ebmud.com/water quality. we monitor for hundreds of different contaminants. The only ones that you'll find in our annual water quality report are the ones that were detected. Most of the samples that we take have a result of not detected because basically they're just not there. That's what makes East Bay mud water so great. It's what's not in the water. This is a table from the water quality report. And you can see that the detected levels of the contaminants that are regulated for public health are in this first table. And we consistently meet all the standards. And there's another table that also includes the secondary standards that are regulated for aesthetics, like the taste and smell and such that are shown here. These are more about the appearance of the water than health-related parameters. And East Bay Mud meets all of the requirements and then goes the extra mile to make sure that your water tastes good too. So one more poll. How many times a year does East Bay Mud test the water?
All right, we'll end the poll.
All right. Looks like most people got it right. We take about, actually more than 20,000 grab samples every year. All right, so we're going to talk about some more parameters that are not in your water. You may have heard about PFAS, which is per and polyfluoral alkyl substances. Those are not in our water. That's because those are human-made contaminants, and our source water comes from protected watersheds that just don't have factories, airports, and landfills that can release PFAS into the environment. There's no lead in the water for the most part. That's because we removed all lead service lines decades ago. And East Bay Mud also helped write legislation requiring all new plumbing fixtures to be lead-free. And finally, like we talked about earlier, there are no pathogens in the water. The rigorous treatment that we do removes and inactivates pathogens to make sure that our customers don't get sick.
So let's take a deeper dive into lead. Where does lead come from? Well, lead can come from a variety of metals that can be present in plumbing fixtures. And partly in response to the situation in Flint, Michigan, the California legislature passed a law in 2016 that required all community water systems to make an inventory of all lead service lines and unknown user service lines. The law required systems to propose a schedule for replacing lead and unknown service lines by July 1st, 2020. The Division of Drinking Water expects water systems to replace lead and unknown service lines as soon as possible, but no later than 10 years from July 2020. Now, here is an important thing to understand about service lines, and the graphic that's up on the screen might help you understand here what I'm talking about. A user service line is the pipe, tubing, and fittings connecting a water main to an individual water meter or service connection. It does not include the water lateral from the meter to individual homes. These are the homeowner's responsibility, and you can see that to the right-hand side of the dashed red line in the image. All of that stuff between what's probably a little hatch in the sidewalk where the water meter is and the house is actually not under the control of the water system, but instead of the property owner. The Division of Drinking Water highly recommends that the water system, as it goes around conducting its assessment of lead service lines, notify customers if it identifies water laterals that are constructed of lead, and if possible, that the water system also assists in replacement. The same goes for water laterals made of galvanized iron pipe if they are downstream of a lead service line. This is because galvanized pipe can accumulate lead and release it for weeks or months after the water system replaces a lead service line.
This graph shows the number of lead service lines per capita for all 50 states. And you can see that California is dead last, far over here on the right. Lead service lines just weren't commonly used in the West like they were in parts of the eastern parts of the country. When copper and steel were in short supply during World War II, the early to mid 40s, East Bay MUD did use lead for a service line. But in the 1990s, East Bay MUD undertook a major effort to find and remove any remaining lead service lines. And roughly 2,000 lines were replaced at that time. The low frequency with which lead pipes were used in California, combined with East Bay MUD's removal of them, means that there's very little prevalence of lead in the drinking water today. Every now and then we do come across an old lead service line that we missed. And if we find one, as Stefan suggested, we contact the customers and we work with them to safely replace it with a new copper line. Besides getting rid of lead, we've got a corrosion control program in place. We adjust the water chemistry to make sure that lead doesn't leach out of the water or leach out of any remaining lead into the water. And we've been practicing corrosion control since the 1930s. In some cases, there are also short connector pieces of lead in between the water main and the service lateral. These are referred to as goosenecks or pigtails due to their shape. We don't have good records of these, but whenever we find them during the course of regular work, we replace them. So with all that East Bay MUD has done to keep lead out of the drinking water, you still might have concerns, especially about your private plumbing or the plumbing inside your home. We have a lead testing program that you can test your own water. You can visit us at eastbaymud.com/lead for more information about lead and our lead testing program. And you can call us or email us and we'll send you a free kit that'll be analyzed at a third-party certified lab for lead. And now we're going to show you a short video about how you sample your own house for lead using our test kit.
Let's explore how to use East Bay MUD's free home lead testing kit. When the kit arrives in the mail, open to see the contents and instructions. Don't run any water in your home, including faucets, toilets, and irrigation for 6 to 12 hours before you test. Record the time of last water use. Remove the plastic bottle from its packaging and fill with water. We recommend testing at a kitchen or bathroom faucet since they are most used. Stop filling when the bottle is nearly full, leaving just a small space for air. Seal the bottle tightly. Remove the return labels for later. Sign and date the included custody seal, and then firmly affix it over the top of your bottle cap. Place the sealed bottle inside the included Ziploc bag. Then place the bagged bottle inside the same box that it arrived in. Remove the paperwork inside and fill it out. Include the date and the time of last water use. Then fill in the date and then the time that the sample was collected. Remember to also include the room and which floor, upstairs or downstairs, that the sample was collected from. Finally, date and sign the form. Place the completed form into the box with the sample. You're almost done. Just close the box, then affix the included prepaid postage label and the third-party lab address label onto the top of the box. Mail and wait for results. Visit ebmud.com/lead for more information.
All right, we have one last poll. How many gallons of water do you think it takes to make 1 liter of bottled water? That's right. It takes about 3 gallons of water. Good job.
Drinking water right out of the tap instead of bottled water tastes great. You know it's been tested and shown to meet or exceed all regulatory standards. It also reduces waste and resources associated with the production and transport of all those plastic water bottles. Best of all, it only costs about a cent a gallon. I want to thank our panelists at this time and let people know where you can find the information that was presented in today's webinar and how to contact East Bay Mud. You can find information and content here today at ebmud.com/Water Wednesday. We will be posting this recording. And at this time, our water quality experts will answer questions from our audience. As you can see below on the left-hand side, there's a young boy drinking water from a water fountain that is a real East Bay Mud customer. I'd like to open things up to questions. You can call East Bay Mud customer service anytime at 1-866-403-2683 or customer service at ebmud.com by email. You can also visit ebmud.com/water quality for more information. Remember to follow us on our social media threads at EBMUD on Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor. Before we take questions, I want to make sure that our Laura Luong is able to talk a little bit about the next Water Wednesday.
Hi, everyone. I see a lot of good questions in the Q&A, so I won't take up a lot of your time. That was such a great presentation. If you guys enjoyed that, join us for the next Water Wednesday, where we bust some myths on drought. Ever wondered, can we build more dams, convert ocean water to drinking water, or just recycle more water? We'll take a deep dive into these questions. I hope to see you there at Drought Mythbusters on November 17th. And actually, Jean, in the question, she actually asked those exact questions. So I hope you can make it to that, that presentation, Jean.
Thank you so much, Laura. All right, without further ado, let's open things up to questions and answers. I see there's quite a few in the box, so I'll try to go in order here. At the top, hello everyone. I wanted to know what the PFAS levels in our community are and what you recommend to mitigate these impacts. I've heard that reverse osmosis filters are best, but wanted to know if you've tested any, and if so, what models you'd recommend for the average home. Thank you. Susan, do you want to take this one?
You want me to take that one? Sure. Well, in general, PFAS is not a problem for East Bay Mud, really, because our watersheds are pretty protected. PFAS it's a human-made contaminant. So if it's there, it's because somebody put it there. The places where it tends to show up is in groundwater, especially around airports from the long-term use of firefighting foam. And there's some highly publicized cases of factories that have released it to the environment as a contaminant. We're fortunate that those things don't occur in our watershed. We have done some testing, limited testing. It's not required for us to test just yet, but we have done some testing and we haven't found it certainly at levels that are anywhere near notification levels or anything like that. It is pretty ubiquitous. It's pretty much everywhere. It's in pizza boxes and and popcorn wrappers and all kinds of places. It's showing up in a lot of different places. In terms of filters, it is true that reverse osmosis is a way that it can be removed from water. It's not necessary. If you drink East Bay Mud water, it's not necessary to do that because if you're concerned about PFAS, because it's just not there. Stefan, you want to talk a little bit about how the state's requiring that for other systems?
Yeah, so PFAS are generally present, as Susan indicated in the presentation, in areas where the water can be affected by industrial sources of contamination, or things like aircraft firefighting foam, landfills, and so forth. So what the state is doing right now is requiring monitoring at water sources that appear to be vulnerable to those types of contamination. And the results of that monitoring are being collected and evaluated for possible future regulation of these chemicals. So when a chemical is regulated, it means everybody has to monitor for it. But to get to that point, we've got to make a case that it makes sense, and we've got to pass regulations through the process under California law that is required, and that can take a few years. So in the meantime, we're gathering as much information as we can, and we are trying to make sure that monitoring happens at the water sources that are most vulnerable. And if you're served by one of those water sources and there are PFAS present above certain levels of health concern, then your water system has to communicate that, and if possible, remove the sources from service. So fortunately, that hasn't been the case at East Bay Mud, but there are some water systems in the state that are currently figuring out treatment strategies and having to do a little bit more to protect the customer from those compounds.
Thank you so much, Susan and Stefan. I'd like to take a moment to answer, there are several questions about the addition of fluoride to drinking water. So to summarize them, since there are quite a few, why do we put fluoride in drinking water? And what health benefit, if any, does it have? And if we don't want it, how can we do it?
You want to start that one first, Stefan?
Sure, I can start. Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, fluoride has been controversial for decades, and there have always been people that have mistrusted the idea of adding this particular chemical to water. But there's also been a ton of misunderstanding and a ton of misinformation that has gone along with it. And so we as regulators, we're not corrupt. We're not in collusion with the industry. There is no particular thing that any of us have to gain by seeing fluoride added to your water, other than what we still believe is a very significant dental health benefit. That said, we don't know everything, and we're always open to new information. And studies are continually being done about fluoride's addition to drinking water. It's one of the most studied drinking water chemicals that there is. And every now and then adjustments get made to the recommendations for fluoridation of water. Those recommendations are made by folks in the public health field. So folks at the Centers for Disease Control, folks in our Department of Public Health here in California. And we on the drinking water regulatory side, who are mostly engineers and scientists, we follow the recommendations of the public health folks and make sure that if a water system is adding fluoride, that it gets done in a way that is going to be protective of public health, that all the appropriate engineering safeguards are in place, and that water systems can meet the recommended level of fluoride. And that is an important point. It's easy to say fluoride's a poison, that it's toxic. Well, it is. Oxygen is also toxic. All kinds of things are toxic if you have them at very high levels. And the same is true anytime you take over-the-counter medication or prescription medication. The dosage is what matters. And so, well, we regulate fluoride as a contaminant, and water can't contain more than a certain level of fluoride. Here in California, it's 2 parts At the federal level, it's 4. In drinking water, if you're going to add fluoride, you're actually aiming for a much lower level than that. And that is what is considered by the oral health community to be optimal to protect your health and to promote good dental health at the same time. So we know there's a lot of claims out there that we just aren't, looking at all the science. The health community is looking at all the science, and they look at it through a logical lens, and they apply the scientific method and require that studies be peer reviewed, and still come down very strongly on the side of there is a huge health benefit to adding fluoride at the recommended levels in tap water. And on the engineering side, that's what we make sure happens.
Yeah, and I would just echo what Stefan says, and then to make it more specific to East Bay Mud, we have been adding fluoride since the 1970s, and our customers voted at that time to add fluoride. I think it was the vote was done more than once, and our customers have voted for East Bay Mud to continue adding fluoride to the water, and so we have pretty tight controls. It's measured continuously at all of our treatment plants, and we measure it out in our distribution system and make sure that we're not adding too much, but that we're adding the right amount to get that good public health benefit.
Thanks, Susan and Stefan. There's a couple follow-up questions. One, if there's fluoride in water and people would like to have a choice of whether or not that's in their water, is there any way to remove it from home systems?
Sure. There are devices that you can buy to remove fluoride. I would suggest if you are going to use a device like that, that you get one that's been tested and certified. It'll say NSF, National Sanitation Foundation, and they do make filters that are set up to remove fluoride from water. Just make sure you get a certified one, and make sure that you maintain it, that you follow the instructions, because filters that are not maintained can cause problems of their own. They can harbor bacteria and cause other sorts of problems if they're not properly maintained. So just be careful in doing that.
Thanks, Susan. Since we're on the topic of filters, there's a couple questions about filters. And one, if they block lead, and then 2, are they useful?
Yeah, especially in very specific situations, we actually use them, and we give them to our customers as well. For lead in particular, if you disturb an old lead service line, you can sort of shake loose some of the scales that have formed over the years, because these things have been in place for decades. So if we come across a bit of lead in the water system, an old lead service line or a lead gooseneck, we contact the customers and we give them an NSF certified pitcher filter and ask them to use that until the construction work is completed, and we can test the water and make sure that it's safe to drink. So they do have a role. In general, it's not necessary. We meet all the health-based standards, but under some situations, they are definitely appropriate.
Great, thanks, Susan. Along those lines, there's a question about, is East Bay Mud water as good as the 5-gallon bottle of water that I've been drinking, bottled water that I've been drinking? And then also, is there any value at all in ionized water?
Well, I don't know what ionized water is, but I do. It depends. The short answer is always it depends, right? You can certainly buy bottled water that has all different kinds of mineral content. What most people taste is the minerals in the water, hardness, ions that are in the water, and they'll have varying degrees. There are some bottled water companies that make their bottled water in our service area. They use our water to make bottled water. So no, I don't think it's any better than what you get right out of the tap.
Thanks so much, Susan. To your point, a lot of times companies who bottle in our service area purchase that water, and then you're buying it again at a 500% markup. Remember, our water is only about a gallon. Along the question lens, sorry, Stefan, there's actually, why does our water taste so good and that LA water doesn't taste so good? Susan kind of answered it about minerals, but since you've been in LA so long, perhaps you want to take a stab at that one too.
Yeah, I did live in Southern California for a long time, and I grew up here though, and always hoped to get back here because the water tasted so good. Now, I wouldn't say that the LA water necessarily tastes bad, but in a lot of parts of the state, you are going to have different mineral and solids content in the water, and for some people, some water tastes better than others. As a drinking water regulator, though, the point I want to make is that, sometimes there are reasons to drink bottled water. If you live in a place where the water just has a taste you can't stand, well, okay, you got to drink water somehow. And, whether it's a home treatment system or bottled water that you go to, I understand that. If you live in a place where your drinking water actually isn't safe, and when I say that, there are very few places in California where the drinking water is actually not safe. And if you do live in one, you are being informed of that routinely by your water system and by the state. And we are trying to find ways to solve that problem. And one of those ways might be providing bottled water, at least until the source problem can be solved. But everywhere that I have lived in California, LA here, I have drank tap water because I trust it. I know what's in it. I spent my whole career regulating it. I've worked in parts of the world where the water is not safe. And as soon as I got back to California, where it was safe, I just was overjoyed to be able to open my tap and drink straight out of it. So that's what I drink, no matter where I am in the state. And that's what I serve to my kids and my family as well. Tap water.
Thank you, Stefan. I want to address some really important questions on lead. There is a question about, is there any danger of a Flint, Michigan type disaster happening here in our service area? And then also related, was there any lead used in the original pipes or aqueducts? And if so, have they all been replaced?
Well, I'll start with the second one first. In the West, particularly in California, that I'm aware of, and I've asked this question a lot of many experienced staff, lead was only used in small diameter pipes for service lines, and in that very specific time period during World War II. It's not in the aqueducts themselves are steel. They're one of them. Two of them are mortar lined. The other one has a coal tar lining because that's what they did in the 1930s. But no, there's no lead in that pipe. Some of our older cast iron mains from like the I don't know. I'm not exactly sure about the years, but some of the older cast iron mains have a lead seal that holds them together. This old bell and spigot style fixture fitting that holds them together. But aside from that, it's just not commonly done. Actually, the place that we see when we work with a customer that has a high measured lead inside their house, it's most often associated with an old brass faucet. There's some beautiful old brass faucets, and before the lead ban in the mid 80s, brass could have up to 8% lead by weight, in the material itself. And so as they corrode over time, lead can get leached out of brass. In terms of the Flint situation, that's a whole different failure on many levels. And I want to believe that because we have a good working relationship with our state regulators, and we have taken a lot of pains to remove any lead that is remaining in our system, I think it's not going to happen here. It's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, what Susan said about many levels, I think is really the key, because in Flint, it was a failure not just at the water system level, but at the state oversight level. And, as a regulator, I'm not going to promise you that we'll never miss anything or that we'll never make a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. What I will promise you is that when we become aware of a mistake or when we become aware of a problem, we're not going to hide it. We're going to get right on top of it and deal with it as openly and as decisively as possible. And that is what didn't happen in Flint, and I think that's the real tragedy there, is that even once there was evidence of a problem, folks that should have been on top of it and should have been recognizing how serious it was. Instead, we're trying to find ways to explain it away and just kind of hiding their heads in the sand. And that is my commitment to you as your regulator here in California. We're going to try to make sure that nothing like that ever happens. But if we did become aware of that kind of threat, the last thing we would try to do is hide it. We would be out right front with it right away, dealing with it head on.
Thanks, Stefan. Okay, I have two kind of related questions here. Where is coagulated waste disposed of? Or also, where is the debris removed from the filters taken?
Good question. Good question. The coagulated water, that picture at Orinda that showed, we call it backwash water. So it's basically concentrated over a couple of days. That's put into some ponds and it settles by gravity. And so the supernate from the top actually goes into San Pablo Reservoir. So that water is reused again at our Sobrante water treatment plant. At all the rest of our plants, we basically take it in a basin and we allow the solids to settle out. And then we recapture as much of the water as we can. We run it through the treatment plant again, so we don't waste it. And then the concentrated solids, it's different in different places. At the plant
en diferentes lugares.
goes to the local wastewater treatment plant, and the Oakland at Upper San Leandro, it goes to our wastewater treatment plant in Oakland, and it's treated like regular domestic waste from homes and businesses. At Orinda and at Walnut Creek, we actually drive it over to our wastewater treatment plant. There's relatively little of it, so we put it in trucks and we drive it over to our wastewater treatment plant in Oakland. I think you're muted, Charlotte.
Great.
There you go.
Thanks. Those are really interesting questions. I'd actually never given any thought to where our coagulated materials and our filters went. Here's a question. Do communities east of the tunnel receive treated water from Orinda as well?
Communities east of the tunnel? Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. There is a pump station at the Orinda water treatment plant that provides some water. On average, maybe 5 to 10% of what the plant produces serves a somewhat more local area that's east of the hills in Orinda, part of Lafayette, depends on demand. Most of the water east of the hills, though, comes from the Walnut Creek water treatment plant, which is really similar to Orinda. It's right along the aqueduct. So it treats McKellamie water.
Great, thanks, Susan. There's a question, could we please repeat the 3 other reservoirs? They're also being used to treat supplemental water supplies when it's not the other 90% from Party Reservoir.
Yeah, right now that water is coming from Sacramento and it's coming through 2 of our aqueducts, and then it's going into San Pablo Reservoir and Upper San Leandro Reservoir.
Thanks, Susan. Also, why don't we use ozone disinfection? I thought this was a great one to answer because we do use ozone.
We do. 2 of our plants, the one that treats the water from San Pablo Reservoir, which is in El Sobrante, uses ozone. And the Upper San Leandro treatment plant, which is in Oakland, treats water from the Upper San Leandro Reservoir. They both use ozone. Ozone's really expensive. And so like anything else, you use it if you have to. If you can do it less expensively, then that's what you do. And for both of those waters, because they have more organic material in the local reservoirs, and there's just more algal byproducts, there's more stuff to remove. We use ozone because it's a more powerful oxidant, and so we use it at those 2 local plants.
Thanks, Susan. Do we get algal blooms? And if so, which reservoirs do we get them in?
We sure do. We sure do. And as the climate warms up, we seem to get more of them. And that's actually what really drove us to add ozone to those 2 water treatment plants, was the algal blooms and the byproducts of the algae, which really do have quite a noticeable sort of earthy, musty smell to the water that doesn't come out with conventional water treatment. Coagulation and filtration doesn't take out the algal byproducts, but ozone will. So we sort of do two things. We treat the water with ozone to deal with the algal byproducts from an aesthetic standpoint. It does really make the water taste and smell better. But we also keep a close eye on algal toxins. In rare situations, there are certain cyanobacteria can produce toxins, and we test for those. We are fortunate we have not found them, but we're vigilant in keeping an eye on that.
Thanks so much.
Stefan, you have some other some thoughts about algal blooms? I know there's a lot of statewide programs.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. They are becoming more and more of an issue as we deal with warmer temperatures, and even more as we have drought, because the water bodies get smaller and the water gets even warmer. And like a lot of things, algae grow better in warmer temperatures, at least these type do. So besides the taste and odor problems, there are toxins that can come from certain types of algae, and that is something we're concerned about. These things aren't regulated yet in drinking water, and the ability to analyze them is really just in development in the last few years, to where we're finally having reliable, accessible ways to analyze for the toxins. So we're learning a lot more about them. We're just completing right now a round of sampling. We issued an order to water systems in Clear Lake. And if you know Clear Lake, it is like one of the most algae impacted water bodies, probably in the United States. And there are, about 18 public water systems around Clear Lake that take water right from the lake. And so we actually required those systems to do some monitoring this summer, during the worst part of the year for these types of algae, and to take samples at their drinking water intakes and after the treated water. And what we're finding out is that, the treatment systems that these plants have operated correctly are doing a good job of removing the toxins. So that's really encouraging, but still, we are concerned about the rate at which these blooms are picking up around the state. And so it's something we're going to be paying more and more attention to. Good news is, so far it looks like all the evidence we have at drinking water facilities is that the treatment plants are doing their job and they're taking out toxins when there are toxins in the raw water. The bad news is, this is a huge problem for recreational exposure. And so the main, advice I'd want to get out to folks right now is, if you, visit a water body that appears to be impacted by algae, keep your dogs out of it, keep your kids out of it. Most of the problems we've had in California most of the health problems have been with pets, with dogs in particular. They get in there, they get the stuff on their body, they lick it off, they get really high concentrations of it. And so if you go to a water body and you see posted warning signs, because most of the counties now have programs where they will assess the water body and they will post warnings if toxins are likely to be present. Pay attention to those signs. And if it looks bad to you, stay away from it and keep your pets away from it too.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Okay, a couple more questions here. I don't want to keep this too much longer. I'll take a couple more questions, and then anybody here who didn't have their question answered, feel free to send your question to me directly, and you can send it to charla.sullivan@ebmud.com. And I'm going to put it in any questions not answered. I will make sure to drop that as an answer in the chat section or in the Q&A section. What is an MCL? Is a question.
I'll take that.
I was going to say, that's an easy one. Can I have that one?
I'll take it, because I knew when I was saying it, I'm like, man, I shouldn't be using an acronym this much. So I said it the first time. It's a maximum contaminant level. And then, in this business, we have so many of these long terms that we get lazy and we use acronyms. So MCL means maximum contaminant level, but that is the basic type of drinking water standard especially for chemical contaminants. If you have arsenic, you're not allowed to have it at higher than 10 micrograms per liter. So the MCL, or maximum contaminant level, is 10 micrograms per liter for arsenic. Hope that answers it.
Thanks. Maximum contaminant level. Perfect. All right. And then also, what are we planning now for when there's not enough water? Are we going to do desalination? Are we going to do treatment of wastewater? What are our plans as the drought continues?
Yeah, a little bit of all of the above. The biggest thing right now, and I have to preface this by saying I am really focused on the water quality. The water quality, there's a whole nother bunch of experts that work at East Bay MUD that deal with the water quantity piece of it. But we are, like I said, the Freeport facility and bringing in water from Sacramento is our biggest, it's a huge investment. And that does really help us out a lot. I think we're bringing in enough water this year to meet about a third of our needs for the entire year, which positions us well if the drought continues, through to next year. We do have also a lot of effort going into recycled water projects. Not so much desal. That's a little bit farther off because that's just really, really expensive. It's much easier to reclaim wastewater and treat that. We've got several projects where we're using that for basically offsetting some of the potable water, using it in irrigation and boilers, boiler makeup water, things like that in large industrial facilities.
Thanks, Susan.
There's also, and Charlie, actually, you can speak to this much more closely than I can, but our customers have done a stellar job of reducing water use over the years. We've got all kinds of, lawn replacement programs, and encouraging customers to use less is a really big tool in that toolbox as well.
Yeah, definitely. We have really, I guess, going back to your original point of that, we have a really diversified water portfolio. I think that's the really important thing to mention here and to recapture. It's really important to know that East Bay MUD really thinks really broadly about where we get our water supplies from when we don't have enough, and how we can plan for the future. And there are actually really great resources on our website. The Urban Water Management Plan was recently approved, and it would be a really good reference for anyone who's really interested in these kind of questions about what would happen as our water demand increases. And you're right, Susan, our customers, water conservation is also one of our greatest tools as a community to be able to mitigate long-term drought situations. So water conservation, our customers are, compared to 2020, I think the running total right now cumulative is about 7% savings from the 2020 same time frame. So I do applaud our customers for doing that great work, in conjunction with all of the other water supply long-term planning that people can find out more about in our urban water management plan. For desalination, there is a great fact sheet on our website as well. And if you come to our
next Water Wednesday, right?
You can find out all about what we're doing. All right. How much water is in the world? I don't know how to answer the question, because is it fresh water, salt water, or is it just total quantity of water in the entire world?
I have no idea. You know that one, Stefan?
Yeah, no, I don't have the figures, but the way that it usually gets described is, there's this much water in the world, including the oceans, and like this much of it is fresh water, and this much of it is fresh water that's available for drinking and other types of human uses. So there's a ton of it obviously in the ice caps, but a tiny fraction of all the water on our planet is actually water that we can use for drinking.
All right, thanks. Our general manager says 3% of water on our 3% of all the water on our planet is fresh water, And then there's only a fraction, like you said, mentioned, Stefan, that is available for us to be able to actually use as drinking water. All right, there's only a couple more questions. There was a question about, there's a couple more questions about filters. Are Brita filters helpful? Do they block copper? And those have already
yeah, I would say I can't speak to particular brands. Just make sure that it's tested and certified. That there's pretty good information out there about, you know, there's good filters and not so good filters. Just make sure you get a good one if you get one.
Yeah, our business is mostly to do everything we can to make sure that you don't need to use a filter, at least not for health reasons. But all of those devices, you know, should list on them what contaminants they're able to remove. And if they are making a health claim, like they remove lead or something like that, then they should have that NSF certification demonstrating that it has been tested by an independent organization and that it can do what it says. And then I'll just reiterate what Susan said earlier about use those things following the manufacturer's recommendations. The instructions that come with it that say replace the filter every 2 months or 6 months or whatever it says, that's not optional. That is essential, because if you don't do that, the thing could actually be creating a health hazard for you rather than removing one.
Thanks, Susan and Stefan. I would like to address, there's a couple of the related questions about East Bay MUD's future demands, and we touched on this, but where will the water come from? When would we not hand out new construction permits to tap to our water system in the future?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I don't know. I would refer you back to the urban water management plan, because there certainly there's a lot of thought that's gone into that. I saw a really interesting graph. I wish I had it to share here, but it looked at sort of our customers' per capita water use over the last, you know, since the 1930s, since East Bay MUD came into effect or came into being. And it's steadily decreased. People have used, on a per capita basis, less and less water. So, you know, where we thought we would be in the 1970s is certainly not where we're actually using less water now, but we have more people. So I don't know. I don't know where that'll go in the future. We could get more and more efficient, and so then we'd be able to support more people, but I really don't know.
Yeah, that is, I would definitely refer folks back to the urban water management plan as well. There's a lot of really good information about what we are doing, particularly to combat climate change. But as mentioned by Susan earlier, water conservation and our ability to plan and utilize supplemental supplies together really have made all the difference. So we are in a much better place than many other areas at this time in the drought, where the governor is, you know, doubling down on his drought declaration. East Bay MUD is in a really good place because of all the forework and knowing that drought is a way of life for us here in the East Bay. So at this time, we do have enough water, and I know that we will have enough water. And you can always check our water supply numbers on our website. And if you have questions after consulting the urban water management plan, do feel free to contact us and come to our Mythbusters event next month. All right, let's take 2 more questions. What is used as a coagulant when treating water?
We'll use a couple of different ones. At the Sobrante and Upper San Leandro treatment plants, we use aluminum sulfate. And at the 3 McKellamie plants, we use what's called polyaluminum chloride, which is basically hydrolyzed alum. And it basically turns into aluminum hydroxide, which is really the same compound that clay and the bulk of dirt is made out of. It basically turns into an inorganic dirt when it's all done.
Thanks, Susan. There's one also. Recently, we feel the water quality has been a bit different. Is it due to mixing of water or chlorine or others?
It depends where you are. We're definitely moving things around right now as we bring in the Freeport supplies. Like I said, we're going to bring in about enough to meet 1/3 of our use for the whole year. So we're filling up reservoirs and we're running treatment plants that we wouldn't necessarily run as heavily at this time of year. So you may be getting water, if you're kind of right in one of those edge zones, you may be getting water from a plant that you don't typically get at this time of year. But it's always good to give us a call if you're having, if it does seem really different, we would like to know about that. So give us a call and we can help your specific question, help with your specific question.
Perfect, thanks. One question, is there any chance that PFAS can contaminate a water supply in the distribution system if the distribution pipes pass through contaminated PFAS soil?
I don't think so. Generally, the pipes are kept under pressure. That's what pushes the water, from our treatment plants to our storage reservoirs and into people's homes. So the pressure is really what keeps everything out of the pipes, all the contaminants, including something like PFAS. We use materials that typically don't allow compounds to leach through them. So I don't know what the mechanism would be. I suppose in the case of a break, and a loss of pressure localized, that theoretically could happen, but I think it's pretty unlikely. You have something else, Stefan?
No, just to echo what you said.
Thank you. All right, we'll take this last one. How do you test for taste and odor?
It's super subjective, huh? There is, we have a couple compounds that are associated with algae, cyanobacteria. They're called Josmin and methyl isoborneal. Those do have analytical tests, and we test for that all the time. And so we have an actual number associated with those. But there's a lot of other compounds that can cause odor. And so there's a test that we have to do that's regulated called TON, which is a threshold odor number, which is a really old test that basically involves people smelling the water in cereal dilutions, hot and cold. Usually what happens is our water shows up as smelling like chlorine, because it does have chlorine in it with the TON test. There are also other things called flavor profile analysis, where you have a panel of trained testers that will smell the water. Again, hot and cold in different dilutions in a fairly structured kind of way with odor-free materials. But at the end of the day, it is really subjective.
Thanks, Susan. There's actually only one more question left on this thread. How do you keep the distribution system clean post-treatment?
Also a good question. We take a lot of samples, hundreds every month throughout the distribution system, and we look for the chlorine residual. A chlorine residual helps us not only make sure that it's there, so it's still providing some protection from pathogens, but the loss of a chlorine residual is an indication that something else has gotten into the water, or some sort of something that exerts a chlorine demand has appeared in that part of the system. We also take samples for bacteria in different, again, in hundreds of parts throughout the distribution system, hundreds of locations. We try to move the water around to keep it fresh. Water's perishable, right? Just like milk or beer or anything else, you want to drink it when it's fresh if you can. So under certain conditions, we may have to flush water mains and remove debris if any debris got in the water. But really, it's a combination of operational things that we do to move the water around and keep it fresh, or and followed up by testing and confirming that we've kept it fresh.
And what I'd add to that is the distribution system itself has to be protected. And that means that when it is, in tanks, anytime that it's open to the atmosphere, those tanks have to be, the roofs have to be in good shape. Any vents that they have to have screens around them that can keep out even tiny insects and debris. And And then the water system has to be under pressure the whole time, as Susan mentioned earlier. Water under pressure is difficult to get a contaminant into, because if you penetrate that system in any way, stuff comes out rather than stuff going in. And I mentioned that, we at the Division of Drinking Water inspect water systems. Well, part of what that means is we go around, we look at all the tanks, we look at any part of the system that's accessible, and make sure that it's well protected. And, if there are deficiencies, torn screens or anything like that, the water system gets a letter instructing them to fix all those things. But between the chlorine or chloramine residual that's in the water and just keeping the facilities tight and protected, that's the best assurance that nothing bad's going to happen in distribution. As Susan said, making sure that the water moves around, doesn't stay for too long. And if there is like a main break, if a big enough break happens that the system drains and depressurizes so that stuff can get into it, then we and the water system get all over that and, isolate those parts of the system. There are requirements for how the water system has to clean and disinfect those mains after repairing them. And if any of that water had a chance of getting to you, the customers, you have to be notified of that, so that you can take measures like boiling the water or not drinking it until we can make sure it's safe again and take tests to prove it.
Perfect. That actually answered the next question. Yes, water does, as Stefan mentioned, moving water through the pipes and at pressure, it does work to clean the pipes and make sure nothing gets in it. All right, that is the conclusion of all the questions this evening. I want to thank our panelists again. Thank you so much to Stefan, to Susan, to Javier Ramos. Thank you so much also for translating this wonderful presentation into Spanish. If you're looking for the content that was shared today, again, EastBayMUD's website has the information, ebmud.com/Water Wednesday. Please make sure you tune in. You can register for the next event there as well. And again, thanks so much to Susan, Stefan, and to Javier, and to the folks who helped make this presentation possible. Support from Laura Luong and from Lena Favorhill. Thank you.
And thanks to you, Charlotte.
Thanks. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.